An HOA board member, drunk on her own power, decided she was judge, jury, and executioner. Her sentence for me? Ordering my brand new swimming pool to be filled to the brim with wet concrete. What she didn't realize was that her little power trip wasn't just a shocking abuse of her title. It was about to unleash a storm of legal and financial trouble that would completely upend her life. To really get how we ended up here, we have to start at the beginning, the day I thought we'd finally found our forever home. It all started with a pretty simple dream. My wife, Sarah, and I had been working toward it for more than 10 years. We just wanted a house, a real house with a yard, a garage, and enough room so our kids, 10-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Sam, didn't have to share a wall with some noisy neighbor. For 15 years, I've been a project manager in commercial construction. The hours are brutal, and the stress is something else, but I'm good at it. I'm a details guy. I love spreadsheets, and a perfectly executed project plan is a work of art to me. Sarah's a kindergarten teacher, basically a saint who wrangles 35-year-olds every day. We weren't rolling in money, but we were serious savers. Every bonus, every tax refund, every scrap of overtime got funneled into the Dream House Fund. Then, finally, it happened. We found it. A beautiful 2-story place in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood called Willow Creek Estates. It checked all the boxes, a huge backyard that was perfect for a swing set, and if we were lucky, maybe a pool someday. The schools were great, and the neighbors we met seemed genuinely friendly. It felt like walking onto a movie set about perfect suburban life. Of course, there was an HOA. I'd heard the horror stories, but this one seemed different. The fees weren't crazy, and the rule book, a thick, professionally printed binder, seemed filled with common sense stuff meant to keep property values up. You know, keep your lawn mowed, don't paint your house hot pink, keep your trash cans hidden. As a project manager who lives by rules and clear guidelines, I actually appreciated the order. So I did something most people probably don't. I read the entire binder of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC and RS from front to back, twice. It all seemed fine, reasonable even. We bought the house, and that first year was perfect. We painted the kids' rooms, planted a garden, had barbecues. We got to know the families on either side of us. It was everything we'd worked for, the peace, the community, the feeling of finally putting down roots. Our backyard was our sanctuary. During the summer, the kids would be running through the sprinkler, while Sarah and I would just sit on the patio talking about the future. And that's when the pool idea came bubbling back up. It wasn't just for us. It was for the kids. A place for them to make memories, have friends over, and spend hot afternoons splashing around instead of staring at screens. We'd saved for so long, and after running the numbers, we realized we could actually do it. And not just any pool. We dreamed of a beautiful in-ground pool with a little waterfall and a nice stone deck. It was going to be our own private oasis. I had no clue that this dream was about to turn into a complete nightmare, all because of the one person who ruled our little slice of heaven with an iron fist. The first sign of trouble was named Brenda. Brenda Wilkinson was the president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA. Picture this, a woman in her late 50s, helmet of blonde hair that never moved, a permanent scowl, and a voice that could make milk curdle. She lived in the biggest house in the neighborhood, right on a corner lot where she could see everything. She made her rounds in a golf cart with a clipboard on her lap, like some modern-day queen surveying her kingdom. My first run-in with Brenda was over something so small it was almost funny. I'd left our empty trash and recycling bins at the curb for maybe 3 hours after pickup. I got home from work, saw them, and was literally walking down the driveway to grab them when her golf cart screeched to a halt right in front of my house. "Excuse me," she said, her voice just dripping with fake sweetness. "Are you aware of Article 4, Section B, Subsection 9 of the Willow Creek Bylaws?" I stopped in my tracks. "Can't say I have that one memorized, Brenda," she sniffed, adjusting her giant sunglasses. "It states quite clearly that all refuse containers must be retrieved from the curb, no later than 6 p.m. on the day of collection. It is now." She paused to look at a gaudy diamond-covered watch. 6:17 p.m. I just stared at her. I just got home from work. I was on my way to get them. Punctuality is a cornerstone of a well-maintained community, Mark, she said, spitting my name out like it tasted bad. This is your official verbal warning. The next time, it will be a $25 fine.
And just like that, she zoomed off, leaving me standing there completely baffled. A warning for being 17 minutes late with the trash cans. It was ridiculous, but I figured she was just a volunteer taking her job way too seriously. I brushed it off and didn't think about it again, but that was just the start. A week later, we got a crisp envelope from the HOA. Inside was a formal notice with a picture of a single dandelion growing near our mailbox. The fine was $50 for failure to maintain weed-free landscaping. I had mowed 2 days before. I started to get the feeling we were being watched. That's when the project manager in me switched on. I wasn't about to get bullied by some petty tyrant. I pulled out that CC&R binder and a highlighter. I read the whole thing again, but this time I was reading it like I was preparing for a lawsuit. I checked every rule, every clause. I also went online and researched state and local laws about HOAs. It turns out that while HOAs do have a lot of power, it's not absolute. Their rules have to be enforced fairly, and they have to follow specific procedures. This wasn't about the $50. It was the principle of the thing. I sent a certified letter to the HOA board, formally disputing the fine. I included a dated photo of my lawn showing it was perfectly maintained. I respectfully noted that the bylaws didn't have a zero-tolerance policy for a single weed, and that targeting us like this could be seen as harassment. I never got a response, but the $50 charge vanished from our next HOA statement. It was a tiny victory, but it taught me two things. Brenda was on a power trip, and she'd back down when faced with facts and the implied threat of legal action. I had a feeling that knowledge would be useful. I just had no idea how useful. After months of planning, we were finally ready to build the pool. Knowing what I was dealing with, I prepared for this project like it was a military operation. I wasn't just building a pool, I was building an airtight legal case for it. The first step, according to the HOA rules, was submitting a detailed proposal to the Architectural Review Committee, the ARC. And guess who was the chairwoman of the ARC? Yep, Brenda. I spent weeks on that proposal. This was no sketch on a napkin. I hired a professional landscape architect for official blueprints. The plans had everything: the exact size and location of the pool, the non-slip travertine decking material, the model number and decibel rating of the pump to prove it was quiet, the specs for a safety fence that exceeded county code, and even a landscaping plan that only used plants from the HOA's pre-approved list. I had all the city permits secured in advance. My proposal was a 60-page, spiral-bound monument to following the rules. I made 10 copies. The ARC meeting was in the clubhouse in some sterile beige room. I sat on one side of a long table, and the 5 committee members, led by Brenda, sat on the other like a panel of judges. I presented my plan calmly and professionally. I walked them through everything. I basically answered all their potential questions before they could even ask them. The other 4 members seemed impressed. They were nodding along, and one of them even said, "Wow, you've really done your homework." Brenda, however, looked furious. For her, this was never about the rules. It was about control. And my meticulous, by-the-book plan was taking away any real reason for her to say no. but that didn't mean she wouldn't try. "The color of this tile," she said, pointing a long red nail at the sample of a nice, muted blue tile. "It seems a bit loud, a bit too vibrant. It could be a visual nuisance." I was ready. "Brenda, if you look at page 42 of the proposal, you'll see that tile, Ocean Mist, is the exact same one used in the community pool right outside, which this board approved 5 years ago." She scowled. The retired accountant next to her had to stifle a laugh. "And this waterfall," she pushed. "What about the noise? We can't have constant splashing sounds disturbing the neighborhood." "Excellent point," I said, flipping to page 51. "That's why I included the manufacturer's specs for the pump. At its highest setting, it's about 45 decibels from 20 feet away. A normal conversation is around 60. Plus, our bylaws don't regulate backyard noise during the day as long as it's under the city's 70 decibel ordinance." This went on for an hour. She questioned everything: the mortar for the stone, the brand of the fence latch, the type of grass I planned to plant. And every single time I had an answer, a page number, a spec sheet, or a direct quote from the CC and RCs. I was polite, I was calm, and I was relentless with the facts. I was basically drowning her in paperwork. Finally, she had nothing left. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, just fuming. The retired accountant, Mr. Henderson, finally spoke up. "Well, Mark, I have to say, this is the most thorough proposal I've ever seen. You've met every single requirement. I don't see any reason we could deny this. I move to approve the project." Another member seconded the motion. The vote was 4-1. Brenda's hand stayed on the table. The motion passed. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She looked right at me and hissed, just loud enough for me to hear, "This is not over." A chill ran down my spine. She wasn't just mad. She was personally offended that I had challenged her and won. I had won the battle, but I knew without a doubt the war was just getting started. The day the excavators broke ground was the day Brenda's harassment kicked into high gear. It was like the sight of work happening on my property sent her over the edge. Her golf cart was suddenly a permanent fixture on the street in front of my house. Her tactics were a masterclass in being a petty tyrant. She would stand on the sidewalk right at my property line and film the workers with her iPad, claiming she was documenting potential violations. She'd try to argue with the construction foreman, questioning his permits and his methods. He was a pro and, after the first day, just learned to ignore her. Then the official notices started pouring in again. They were absurd. A $100 fine for unauthorized commercial activity because a worker's van had a logo on it. I fought it by citing the part of the bylaws that allowed for vehicles for approved construction. The fine got dropped. We got a $50 fine for debris in the public view because a little bit of mud from the excavator touched the curb before it was swept up. I fought it with a time-stamped photo from my phone showing the clean curb 30 minutes later. That fine got dropped too. It became a second job. I'd come home from work to a new, bogus accusation from Brenda, and I'd spend an hour drafting a perfect, legally sound rebuttal with photos and citations from the rulebook. I sent every single one via certified mail to the whole HOA board, building a massive paper trail of her targeted harassment. This is when I decided to upgrade my defenses. My secret weapon wasn't some hidden law degree, it was my training as a project manager. A huge part of my job is mitigating risk and documenting everything. And Brenda was the biggest risk I'd ever managed. I bought a top-of-the-line multi-camera high-definition security system. I put cameras everywhere, covering my entire front yard, backyard, side yards, and the street. Every angle was covered, recording 24/7 in crystal-clear 4K with audio, all saved to a secure cloud server. I got instant motion alerts on my phone. Brenda, of course, noticed the cameras right away. She had the nerve to send me a notice claiming they violated our neighbor's privacy. I sent back a letter that not only pointed out there was no rule against security cameras, but also included a diagram showing the exact field of view of each one, proving they only recorded my property and the public street, which is perfectly legal. I also added a little note that the cameras were installed because of unwarranted observation and harassment. A clear shot at her. I also started talking to my neighbors, and it turned out I wasn't her only target. Mr. Henderson, the accountant from the ARC, told me she once tried to fine him because his white trim paint was, in her words, too brilliant. The family on our other side got fined because their daughter's play set was cedar instead of approved redwood, a distinction that didn't actually exist in the bylaws. Once I started asking around, the whole neighborhood's quiet resentment started turning into shared anger. Her abuse of power was a pattern. While HOA board members can be held personally liable for actions taken in bad faith or outside their authority, getting there is often a long and complicated process. The harassment got even worse as the pool was nearing completion. The shell was in, the tile was laid, the deck was poured. It was actually starting to look like the oasis we'd dreamed of, which seemed to make Brenda even angrier. One afternoon, she marched right into my backyard, straight past the no trespassing signs, and started screaming at the plastering crew that their mix was unapproved. The foreman, a big guy named Gus, calmly asked her to leave his work site. She refused, puffing out her chest and yelling, "I am the president of the HOA. This is my jurisdiction." Gus just pointed up to the security camera right over his head. "Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property and you're being recorded. I'm going to ask you one more time to leave before I call the cops."
That finally did the trick. The combination of the camera and the threat of the police sent her scurrying away, but not before she shot me a look of pure hatred. I was sitting in my home office watching the whole thing on my monitor. I saved the clip and labeled it, Brenda Trespassing Number 1. With her gone, the pool was finally finished and filled with water. It was perfect. We were planning our first swim for that weekend. I naively thought the worst was over. I thought I had won. But Brenda wasn't just a bully. She was completely unhinged, and she was about to make a mistake so huge and so illegal it would bring her whole world crashing down. The weekend we were supposed to have our first swim, we decided to take a day trip to buy patio furniture. We left early Saturday morning, kids buzzing in the back seat, excited to finally jump in the pool when we got back. The water was a perfect shimmering blue. Around 1 p.m., while we were an hour away arguing about umbrellas, my phone buzzed. A motion alert from my backyard camera. I wasn't too worried at first. It's usually just a squirrel. I tapped the notification to watch the live feed. My blood turned to ice. On my screen, a huge concrete truck was backing up my driveway. My heart started pounding. I watched, my hand shaking, as two guys unrolled a long chute, dragged it through my side gate, and aimed it at my brand new pool. And then she walked into the frame. Brenda. She was marching across my lawn with this look of twisted triumph, wearing a ridiculous oversized hard hat. She waved a piece of paper and pointed at the pool. I could hear her voice through my phone's speaker, tinny and distorted but filled with venom. Right there. Fill it all the way to the top. The whole thing. This scenario is so extreme it's hard to believe, and I want to be clear that this kind of direct criminal destruction by an HOA official is incredibly rare. An HOA simply does not have the authority to destroy property like this without a court order, which she absolutely did not have. The concrete foreman looked hesitant, arguing with her, probably asking if she was serious. But Brenda was relentless. She got in his face, jabbing her finger at the paper, some fake emergency order she must have typed up, and screamed about hazardous structures and bylaw enforcement. I heard her threaten to sue his company into the ground if he didn't follow her official HOA directive. It was pure insanity. She had snapped. This wasn't petty harassment anymore. This was a felony. For a second, I was just frozen in disbelief. This can't be real, I thought. But it was. I was watching a live stream of a lunatic destroying my property. My project manager brain kicked in. Document, act. First, I hit the record button on my phone, making sure a separate copy of the live stream saved directly to my device. Second, I called my lawyer. I got his voicemail but left a clear, urgent message. David, it's Mark. Brenda Wilkinson is at my house right now filling my brand new pool with concrete. I have it on live video. Call me. Third, and most important, I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Mark, I said, my voice shaking with rage and adrenaline. I am watching a live video from my security cameras. A woman is on my property directing a concrete truck to fill my swimming pool with concrete. It is happening as we speak. 124 Willow Creek Lane. This is felony destruction of property. The dispatcher sounded a little skeptical, which is fair, but the urgency in my voice must have cut through. Sir, are you there now? No, I'm an hour away, but I'm watching it. I have it on video. Her name is Brenda Wilkinson. She's the HOA president. She's committing a major crime. The dispatcher promised officers were on their way. I hung up and looked at my phone. The concrete was already flowing. Thick gray sludge was pouring into my beautiful pool, turning the crystal clear water into a sickening mess. And Brenda was standing at the edge, arms crossed, with a smug, triumphant smile on her face. The smile of a tyrant who thinks she's untouchable. She had no idea her life was about to be ruined. She had no idea her moment of victory was being recorded in 4K and that the police were on their way. She had just handed me, on a silver platter, all the evidence I would ever need. The drive home was the longest hour of my life. Sarah was in shock. The kids were crying in the back, totally confused. I was a mess of emotions, fury, feeling violated, but also a weirdly calm, calculated rage. Brenda had crossed a line, and there was no coming back. We pulled onto our street and saw the flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cars were parked at the curb. The concrete truck was still in my driveway, its chute now thankfully still. A small crowd of neighbors was gathering. I parked and ran to the officers. I'm the homeowner. I called. A serious-looking officer, Sergeant Miller, turned to me. You're Mark? Yes, I said, already pulling out my phone. I have the whole thing on video. I showed him everything, the clip of her trespassing days earlier, then the footage from an hour ago. The truck, her ordering the foreman to fill it, her gleeful supervision. As Sergeant Miller watched, his face went from professional skepticism to disbelief, and finally to grim resolve. This is incredibly clear evidence of criminal trespassing and felony vandalism, he said, shaking his head. The damage here is well over the felony threshold. Where is she now? She lives on the corner, I pointed. The big house. Just then, my lawyer, David, called me back. I gave him the quick version. Don't say another word to anyone but the police, he said. I'm on my way. Sergeant Miller and the other officer walked down to Brenda's house. I watched from my lawn as they knocked. Brenda answered the door with that same smug, defiant look. She clearly thought her HOA president title was some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. Sergeant Miller was having none of it. I saw him talking, then he pointed back at my house. Another officer walked up with a tablet, probably showing her the video. Brenda's entire posture changed. Her shoulders slumped, her face went white. The smugness vanished, replaced by pure shock. She was caught, red-handed, and she knew it. What happened next was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. Sergeant Miller said something, and she shook her head. He spoke again, more firmly. Then he and the other officer turned her around, put her hands behind her back, and clicked handcuffs onto her wrists. A literal gasp went through the crowd of neighbors. Brenda Wilkinson, the Queen of Willow Creek, was being arrested. They walked her to the cruiser, her face just a mask of humiliation. As they put her in the car, the neighborhood dam finally broke. My neighbors, Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Garcia, came right over, not just to offer support, but to talk to the police. "Officer, you should know she's been harassing this family for months," Mr. Garcia said. "She does this to everyone," another neighbor added. "We've all got stories." The mood flipped from shock to shared outrage. Years of frustration with Brenda's reign of terror came pouring out. People were lining up to give statements, sharing their own stories of bogus fines and harassment. Brenda hadn't just destroyed my pool. She had revealed to the entire community, and now the police, exactly who she was. The months that followed Brenda's arrest were a whirlwind of legal action. My lawyer, David, was practically salivating when he saw the video. "Mark," he said, "this isn't just a slam dunk. This is the case lawyers dream about. We're going to hit her with everything." And we did, fighting on two fronts, criminal and civil. The criminal case wasn't as quick as you see on TV. These things take time. Brenda was charged with felony criminal mischief. The cost to fix the damage, which involved excavating the concrete, demolishing what was left of the pool, and rebuilding it, was estimated at over $75,000, making the charges very serious. The DA used the crystal-clear video, my binder full of her previous harassment notices, and testimony from other neighbors. They painted a picture of a malicious, premeditated crime. While the case was pending, a judge issued a restraining order and barred her from serving on the HOA board. In the end, she was convicted. She avoided jail time, but she got a long probation, heavy fines, and court-ordered counseling, leaving her with a permanent felony record. But the real hit came from our civil suit. We sued her personally, and we also sued the HOA as an organization. Our argument was that Brenda acted with malicious intent, and that the HOA board was negligent for letting her reign of terror go on for so long. This is where it got interesting. The HOA's insurance policy, the one meant to protect board members, typically has an exclusion for deliberate criminal acts. Once Brenda was convicted of a felony for this exact incident, the insurance company predictably denied the claim. That meant they wouldn't pay for her defense or the damages. This left Brenda personally liable, and the HOA was still on the hook for its own negligence. In the civil trial, David was a machine. We sued for the full cost of replacing the pool. We sued for the temporary dip in our property value. We sued for the cost of therapy for our family. And then, we sued for punitive damages, which are designed not to compensate us, but to punish her and send a message. The judge was disgusted by her actions, calling them a shocking abuse of community trust and an act of pure malice. The court awarded us all of our compensatory damages. Then came the punitive damages. The judge awarded a substantial amount, citing Brenda's outrageous conduct. It wasn't the millions you see in movies, but it was more than enough to ruin her. In a final crushing blow, the judge agreed that the debt was a result of a willful and malicious injury, making it much harder, if not impossible, for her to discharge in bankruptcy. The fallout was catastrophic for her. The HOA's portion of the settlement forced a massive emergency assessment on every single homeowner. The community was, to put it mildly, furious. The rest of the board resigned in disgrace. Brenda, facing a judgment she could never pay off, had to sell her precious corner house. She was left financially ruined, a convicted felon, and an outcast in the very neighborhood she once terrorized. As for us, we rebuilt. The pool is even more beautiful now. Our new HOA board, which I helped elect, rewrote the bylaws to put in term limits and checks and balances so no one can ever get that much unchecked power again. Sitting by our new pool with my family, watching the kids laugh and splash in the water, I often think about the lesson here. When you're dealing with a bully who uses petty rules to feel big, you don't stoop to their level. You rise above. You arm yourself with facts. You document everything, and you let their own rage and ego become their downfall. Brenda thought she was destroying my dream. In the end, the only thing she destroyed was herself. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever had a nightmare run-in with an HOA? Let me know your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss what's next. The story of Brenda and the concrete-filled pool is an extreme example, but it's a powerful reminder that in the wrong hands, even a little bit of power can be a dangerous thing. But it also shows that if you're diligent, if you document everything and you stick to the rules, you can stand up to that kind of tyranny. The law can be slow and complicated, but it's a potent tool against people who think they're above it. Stay safe, know your rights, and never let a bully win. We'll see you in the next one.